All right, so Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul uqdata min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And welcome to everyone. I'm just going to help with one thing, and then we're going to go through some housekeeping rules. And actually, I'm not going to call them rules. I'm going to call them guidelines, because really this space is for us to really come together and learn from one another. Of course, Wadud is going to be spending some time on content, on addressing overwhelm through a prophetic heart. But we'll also be sharing insights and comments and reflections in the chat. So yes, it will be an hour long. Nasri, 40 minutes on the content and about 10 to 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end. And you please use the chat for your reflections and comments and such, and make sure that you are really sharing with everyone, right? So I'm seeing a lot of messages coming in directly to the hosts and panelists, but we really encourage you to change that setting to everyone and share those reflections. You never know who can benefit from what you have to reflect and share with us on. So I'm also seeing another question here on recordings. So the recordings will indeed be available. We'll have, if you registered for the webinar, you will have access to the link via email within 24 to 48 hours, inshallah. Otherwise, it'll also be available on our social media platforms as well. So keep a lookout on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on and so forth. If you have questions, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom. It'll just be easier for us to keep track of the questions versus the chat. So feel free to drop your questions at any time during the session, but we will be addressing those at the end, inshallah. And then last thing under housekeeping guidelines here, really encourage you to set your intentions for why you're here, why you chose to be here and not anywhere else today. There are probably multiple places you could be, but you chose to be here. And so take a minute to really think about what drew you to the webinar, as well as what you're hoping to take away from it. And perhaps Brother Wadud will also share in more detail, or have us reflect in more detail on that as well. And then a lot of you were first timers, as you mentioned in the chat. And so I want to take this opportunity to welcome all of you who are new to our work, whether it's the Productive Muslim Company or Barakah Academy, more generally speaking. And just a bit of background here, the Productive Muslim Company is a professional development training organization that produces thought leadership in the form of articles, newsletters. We also have one book out that, of course, Muhammad Faris has written, but there's another one on its way, inshallah. And we also have really strong social media platforms as well that feature digestible, practical information. So if perhaps classes are not something that you're able to take right now, our social media platforms, and of course these other forms that I mentioned, such as newsletters and articles, so on and so forth, have a lot of great training material as well. I'm going to share my screen really quickly here to tell you a little bit more about Barakah Academy. As some of you mentioned, you know Barakah Academy, but this is the training arm of the Productive Muslim Company. And so what we are doing at Barakah Academy is really training spiritually intelligent leaders to create deep impact on the Ummah. And we partner with people like Wadud, whom we consider one of the world's best faith-based instructors on mindfulness, to really offer live cohort-based online masterclasses that connect spirituality to personal and professional development. And like Wadud, we have other instructors as well. We go down here, you'll see a range of different topics that we cover. So wellness with Richard Jordan, the original masterclass here with Muhammad Faris on productivity, the confidence masterclass, which is one of our newest ones, aside from wellness, with Hafsa Adam. And then there's one more that's an advanced productive with Dr. Rothman from the Cambridge Muslim College. So I want to, okay, so some people are having trouble with the sound. So I just want to make sure that I can get a thumbs up that it's working. Wadud, is it working for you? Because I've seen a couple of comments.
In terms of sound?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, just wanted to make sure that I wasn't just talking out into the cloud or into the unknown there. All right. So those of you that are struggling with the sound, I just encourage you to check your audio, whether you're on mute or otherwise. All right. So without further ado, I am going to pass the mic to Wadud to kick us off with the agenda and a brief introduction about him, and then go right into the content. And as a reminder, please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A session throughout the hour that we're together. All right, Bismillah.
All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome, mashallah. Bismillah. Salatu salamu ala Rasulullah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa halul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. May Allah bless you and increase you, inshallah, through this session. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq. So let me start by doing a quick practice. This is something that is customary in our masterclass. And I just want to see, how are you arriving today? About 105 of you, mashallah, from around the world. What an honor to be in your company. May Allah bless you. I wanted to ask you, how are you arriving at this moment? So just for a moment, think about 3 words. So let's listen to my instructions first before I tell you how to do this. You're going to be checking in. Just take a deep breath, check in, and find out, how am I arriving? If there is one word for me to explain how am I feeling or what's happening as I check into my mind and my body and my heart. How are you arriving with your mind? How are you arriving with your body? And how are you arriving with your heart? Just one word for each of those three areas. And then, so there will be 3 boxes, and you'll be writing one word for those 3 boxes. So go to menti.com, as you see on the screen here, menti.com, and punch in that code. Perfect. Mashallah, it's already coming in. I'm going to also put it in the chat window. Shamal, thank you. Here's the code, and you don't need any space in between. How are you arriving? I really appreciate that some of you are sharing and just you're checking in and you're just sharing whatever is coming up for you, and that's okay. Just be real and just share whatever is coming up for you. Yeah. Just stay here for a moment. Just stay here for a moment. As this comes in, just take a look, see what's happening. Make sure that you're putting yours in. And some of the bigger words are those that multiple of you are sharing. So the words in the center, the bigger words, we have multiple entries. Okay. All right. So I think we have about 50 people out of 112, mashallah, that have 55, mashallah. All right. So we'll stop here. And just for a moment, checking in, just taking a look at some of the words that's here. So we see anxious, we see overwhelmed. We are looking at stressed, exhausted, restless, nervous. Of course, alhamdulillah, there are some apparently positive things that we see here. I would say that none of these emotions are not necessarily positive or negative a lot of times. A lot of times they're just what we're feeling. And as human beings, we feel all of these different things at different times, and they're just completely normal. So I appreciate those of you that were vulnerable to share some of these difficult words. You checked in and you saw overwhelm, you saw stress, you saw anxiousness, and you shared it. Those of you that are excited, grateful, you're here, you're able to be calm. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, increase you in that. But whatever it might be, and we're not in any one state all the time. And this is the way that this world is designed. that we're going to be calm sometimes and we're going to be anxious at other times. But one of the things that we see these days is this sense of overwhelm, this sense of stress, this sense of being tired. It is something that is showing up a lot. In the type of world we're living in, this is showing up a lot. And as we're checking in with our mind, our body, and ourselves, this is the awareness that brings us back to our ability to then figure out, how do I want to show up in this moment? You came home and your child ran up to you and you were actually really overwhelmed. And it was no fault of that child to share whatever they were sharing, or maybe just not act in the best way. And instead of being there for them or being present for them, you reacted in a way that you felt, oh my God, what did I just do? And it's not because you wanted to do that, it's because you're just overwhelmed. You're a bit spent. And maybe with your spouse, maybe at work, maybe with just how you're showing up in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your prayer. And just having that awareness of, how am I feeling right now? How am I arriving in this space? How am I arriving with my mind as I check in with my body, check in with my heart? And that awareness can become the foundation for regulating yourself and helping yourself try to get from your lower self to your higher self. So awareness is the foundation. As you will learn more and you listen more in the masterclass, we talk about this importance of how to cultivate this awareness and how to build this awareness. So I really appreciate everyone sharing. Inshallah, just for a moment, take a silent moment to make dua for everybody that's here. Just for a moment, make dua for everyone, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. May Allah give us tawfiq to operate from a higher self, operate from a place where we're connected to Him, despite all these different things we feel as human beings, and give us tools to utilize and tools to go back to, despite the various challenges we feel in our life, inshallah. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I really appreciate all of you. I'm going to share my presentation. Let me open it up. Here we are. Bismillah, let's go over the agenda for today. All right. Okay. You guys should be able to see it. All right. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, Shamaila already talked about welcome and housekeeping. And we are going to go into overwhelm. How do we process overwhelm? What are some practical tips? Also referring back to the life of the Prophet ﷺ, what do we learn and what type of model can we learn? What type of tools can we learn that are prophetic in a way that we can address overwhelm? And this is really important for us because we, as people of faith, people of Islam, people of Deen, people that really love and cherish our Prophet ﷺ, learning the prophetic model of spiritual cultivation, prophetic model of emotional regulation, prophetic model of trying to get to your better self when you feel like you've lost your better self and you're operating from your lower self. It's really important. So I'm not sure who was going to do the slide. It's not going to be me. So inshallah, you just make dua for me, inshallah, that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me tawfiq and to continue to serve and continue to be of benefit. Shamaila, go ahead.
Yes, so this was on me. So alhamdulillah, we are honored to have Brother Wadud with us here. As you can see here, he has an incredible bio, mashallah. He's the founder of the Mindfulness Matter Leadership Institute, which is a mindfulness and emotional intelligence-based leadership and character development program that seeks to empower people and organizations with tools for personal, professional, and organizational transformation. And Wadud and his wife also co-founded Define 360, which is a faith-based and experiential mindfulness and emotional intelligence program for Muslims to bridge the gap between faith and character, as well as outward knowledge and the inward experience of that knowledge, mashallah. He lives in Dallas with his wife and twin girls, and he completed his graduate studies in leadership and organizational performance at Vanderbilt and a leadership training, actually multiple, at Harvard, IDEO, and the Neuroscience Academy. He's also a certified mindfulness teacher through the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, which was born and developed at Google. So again, incredible, mashallah, and we're so honored to have him part of the Productive Muslim team as an instructor.
all that amounts to just a drop. that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed all of us, inshallah. Whatever Allah has blessed us with, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant barakah and continue to give us tawfiq to use it for His service. What is overwhelmed? What is overwhelmed, and why do we often feel overwhelmed? So let's just use our chat window for a second. Just type in, what do you think overwhelm is? Why do we feel overwhelmed? What is overwhelm? Just listening from just a few people. Too many things going on. You're juggling between many thoughts. You feel a sense of, you don't know what to do. What tools do you practice? How do you go back to your better self? You feel lost. You feel like you've kind of lost the purpose. Saturated, not balanced, not finding that balance. Yeah. Buzzing in your head, that's good. Like you have all these thoughts and emotions going through. You don't even have time to process through them. Not being present. You are carried away. You're getting carried away. You're not being present. Yeah, these are really good. MashaAllah. These are really, really good. Sometimes you get these self-ruminating thoughts. You're overthinking. Your thoughts carry you away. And that definitely has connection to your focus. So all of these are really amazing, really good, really, really good. But you know what? I just want to congratulate all of you, all 131 of you, that you're actually here talking about overwhelm. You're just being here and just talking about overwhelm. This is a beautiful thing. You know why? Because many people, there are millions of people in this world that are going to be overwhelmed for many, many times, for many days and many hours of their life. And they're never going to take time out to learn what overwhelm even means. They're never going to take time out to even think about, how do I figure out a way to help myself, to regulate myself and be my better self, be my best self, be a better human being, be a better Muslim, and learn how to manage overwhelm. So I just want to say that, just be thankful for this moment and have this deep sense of contentment. Allah, you have allowed me to be in this space where I'm learning about something or even reflecting about something. And that reflection, that time I've taken, put barakah in this time and teach me something. Teach me something that can transform me. Teach me something and put nur and guidance and light in something that is said today or something we practice today that can help me find my way. That can help me find my way. Intentions is really important, like Shamila was mentioning, making that intention that it is not because of the knowledge of the person who's sharing this knowledge. It is not because of the slides. It's not because of anything else, but it is because you're seeking it from your heart and you're seeking it from God. And you showed up in this space. And me as an instructor, I'm seeking the same thing from God. I'm asking God, show me the way. How do I practice this and how do I teach this? And put nur in this and light in this and transformation in this for me and others. So that combined dua and that intention will bring the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So just for a second, make dua, inshallah, for a second, that Allah put light in this, put barakah in this, put transformation in this, teach us how to, inshallah, all of us, including me. All right, so overwhelm is that sense of, many of you mentioned, is that sense of, imbalance. Is that sense of imbalance that you are not able to balance between your spiritual, emotional, physical well-being. While you're trying to do one thing, you feel like the other things are not really there. You're completely losing control on other things. Or that sense of imbalance in how much information you're having to process and how many things you're having to do. The sense of imbalance in, not being able to be present when you really need to be present. Not feeling like you're able to cultivate that sense of gratitude and ihsan and excellence in everything you do, calmly and peacefully in one thing at a time, right? And in the article, some of you might have read the article, and Shamila, you can put the article link here. Something really important that, I mentioned in the article about some research that we're seeing, that all the information that we're exposed to, right? In the article, we talked about how we're exposed to so much information today that we are not, we're the human race, in the history of human race, we were never, ever exposed to that much information. In one day, we are processing, so much information we're processing in one day. one of the example that I gave in the article from a cognitive neuroscientist was about how when we walk into a store. Just in 1976, stores used to be stocked with 9,000 items compared to 40,000 items today. Just deciding, what we're going to buy, which one we're going to buy, right? There's so many decisions we're making versus, our parent generation going to the market and, knowing like fruits, vegetables, or whatever they're buying, and that's it. They're buying that and coming home. Now we're deciding among like 100 brands of chips, which chip, I'm going to try today with my family. So your brain is continuously bombarded with so much information that we were never ever exposed to that before. So this is why being able to be present, being able to be mindful, and also filtering out noise, filtering out difficult and thoughts and emotions, or redundant thoughts and emotions, or too many thoughts and emotions, and learning how to be present is so important today as Muslims for our faith, but also as human beings for our productivity, for our spiritual, emotional, physical productivity. Our parents, when they went for a walk outside, just a few decades ago, they went for a walk and they didn't have, they didn't have any phone. They went out, they were in the nature, and they really kind of had that healing, and they were able to come back. We go outside and we're hooked with our phone, we're hooked with our, we're listening to something, or we're continuously hooked, we're continuously connected. So we need to understand the type of world that we're living in, and we have to figure out how do we then go from this lower self, where we're distracted, where we feel like we're always on autopilot, we're just constantly on the go, and then we feel the sense of overwhelm. We feel there's just too much going on. I'm not able to be here calmly and relaxedly. And how do we go from that lower self? The question is, how do we go from the lower self, where we're distracted, on autopilot, overwhelmed, to our best self, where we have this intention, we have an intentional presence, we are aware, just like we did this awareness practice in the beginning of the session. How are you arriving today? And we're conscious of God. We're able to, as Muslims, we're able to also be conscious of God. And this is one of the foundational skills that we need today to really operate and get to our productivity. And as some of you that have done the productivity masterclass with Muhammad, you know about the equation about having that time, energy, and focus, right? That we feel that we're losing track of our time. We feel like because it's so many things are going on, losing your energy. And then, of course, one of the things that we're mentioning here that's connected to the other two is that we don't have that focus. So that is why processing and managing overwhelm is so important. So one of the things we are going to talk about, of course, we go deeper into the masterclass through the heart model, but here we talk about the Prophet's model, a beautiful model from the Prophet's life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on how he dealt with when he felt at his lowest, when he was like definitely at his lowest. And this was the time that the Prophet ﷺ, he went to Taif, right? And we know this story, and I will share the story, that this was when the Prophet ﷺ, he lost his uncle, he lost Khadija radiallahu anha. This was a time that, they were boycotted for a few years in the Sharab of Abu Talib, in the valley of Abu Talib. No one was allowed to do business with them, to deliver any food to them. And the kids were malnutritioned. And to the extent that you could hear, even if you walk like miles away, you could hear the cries of the children. And the companion said that we understood the value of a date. We understood the value of one date when we had no date and we were living off of leaves. They were chewing leaves for a whole day. This happened for a few years, and Khadija radiallahu anha, the mother of the children of the Prophet ﷺ, the mother of Fatima radiallahu anha, the grandmother of Hassan and Hussein, this beautiful companion of the Prophet used to remember her by saying that God has blessed me and provided me the love of Khadija. This is how the Prophet ﷺ loved Khadija. And that seeing his wife, not having any food, getting weak, getting sick, and eventually coming from that and not fully recovering and eventually passing. This was such a low moment for the Prophet ﷺ. Losing his uncle just a little bit before that. Such a low moment for him as community. And he's looking for a refuge. He's making dua and he's looking for refuge. He thinks that Taif would be that refuge. Think of yourself like, as a mom, if you are really, really preparing your kids for an exam or for some type of something that's really important, and you guys work really hard together. Or as a dad, maybe, you're coaching your kids, or maybe you're just you're preparing this beautiful presentation that you're going to be in front of people, and you're preparing for maybe a few months, and it's so important to you, maybe your work or your business, and then you go and you present and you're humiliated, and you completely lose, that few months or a few years of your time. This is the Prophet ﷺ, after 10 years of calling people to Allah, he's finally traveling to Taif with Zayd ibn Haritha radiallahu anhu. And they're walking for miles after miles trying to get to the city on the mountain. And when they finally reach there, not only they're mocked, they also let the chieftains of Taif, they also let these boys or the people on the street to follow them and pelt them with stones. And the Prophet started bleeding to the point that his shoes get stuck in blood. And this is why when Aisha radiallahu anha asked the Prophet, that was Uhud the worst day, the most difficult day of your life, the Prophet mentioned Taif as the most difficult day. Why? Because Uhud, he has a community, he has a refuge, he's in Medina. Even though they got this, they had this setback, they lost some really precious people, but still they are gaining on like that community building. And on the other hand, he was the lowest of the lowest when he went to Taif. At that time, when he was rejected from that place, and not just rejected, humiliated, and even, pelted with stones, what happens to the Prophet? What does he do? At his lowest moment, when he's feeling overwhelmed, he doesn't know, how am I going to take care of my safety, my family, my community, this mission that the God has given me? How am I going to deliver this mission? Where am I going to find the refuge? Who is going to help me? And at this moment, what does the Prophet do? Finally, as he's out of that territory where people are following him, he finds a place to sit. As he sits down, what is the first thing he does? The first thing the Prophet does is that he immediately returns to this sense of awareness, consciousness, mindfulness of Allah. And this is where the healing begins. Even though initially with his words, as we read his words in Arabic and translate it in English, we see that the Prophet, he's kind of sharing this anguish, this pain, this difficulty that he's going through. He's trying to channel it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but, and it feels like, it feels tough to even read that story and that plea that's coming out initially. But you'll see that just as he tries to come back to that consciousness and awareness of God, that mindfulness of God, that presence of God, it starts healing him as we start seeing the progression. So the Prophet sits and he gets into this deep prayer and he says, God, Allah, I complain to you of my weakness. I complain to you of my scarcity of resources and the humiliation I've been subjected to by the people. He starts talking to Allah. He starts reaching out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The question that we ask ourselves at this moment is that, how do we find relief when we're overwhelmed? How do we find relief when we're overwhelmed? When we feel lost and confused, which prophetic tool do we use to access our inner calm? Who or what do we turn to first to solve my problems? Asking ourselves these questions. These are important questions. Those of you that like to journal, I would say that even taking a snapshot, and when you feel overwhelmed, just get your pen on a piece of paper or your journal. Just keep your pen moving and see what comes up for you. When you just answering this question, how do I find relief when I'm overwhelmed? And when I feel lost and confused, which prophetic tool do I use? Who or what do I turn to? It'll be a good time for reflecting, taking perspective, and maybe as you reflect, you might come up with a few things that could also help. So taking account of, how do we start our healing process? How do we heal when we feel our low, when we feel that overwhelm? The next in the heart model, the Prophet ﷺ, as we see in his dua, is engaging with purpose. He found strength even when he's like, can you think of the physical, the tiredness in his body? Many of you, as you checked in today, you said you're tired or you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. The Prophet walking that many miles while bleeding, and he's sitting down. What is his emotional and physical condition at that moment? And he just said just a few words. If we just go back to the last slide, he just said a few words to Allah. It can be said in less than a minute. But guess what's happening right after that minute? He goes right back to his purpose. He says, as long as you're not displeased with me, I do not care what I face. Just think about this. He's saying, I desire your pleasure and satisfaction until you are pleased. So he goes right back, right after he's connecting to God. He's in this deep moment of being mindful and communicating with God. He goes right back to his purpose. I desire your pleasure. And if you're satisfied, if you're not displeased, if you're happy with me, that's my real goal. That's what I really want. All these people, doesn't matter. Are you happy with me? He goes right back to his purpose. What is my purpose when I'm approaching my work? When I'm coming home? When I'm transitioning from one task to the other? What is my intention? Who am I trying to please? What all the activities that we're engaging in, how are they connected to my purpose? Who am I trying to please? Really important questions for us to think about, and if you like to journal, even to reflect on. If we had more time, we would take some time to journal and even maybe listen to each other. This is what we do in our masterclass. We go do a little bit of deep work. We try to figure out what's happening inside, reflect on some of these questions, talk about these questions with each other, and then go over really important tools. Every week we have practices that we do to try to practice various mindfulness practices rooted in, mashallah, Islamic spiritual psychology, and also integrating modern neuroscience. Continuing on with the prophetic model, the heart model here, that A stands for achieving what you want with gratitude. You never move forward. You never achieve what you want to achieve. You never get from Allah what you want from Allah without this beautiful quality of gratitude. And the Prophet ﷺ, that he used to be kind of da'im al-shukr. The Prophet used to be always in a state of gratitude. Like Rumi says, wear gratitude like a cloak. It'll light up all the corners of your life. The Prophet ﷺ was radiant with gratitude all the time. And can you imagine at that moment for somebody to even say anything about gratitude? I mean, he could just stay in that first phase of complaining to God, and that's it. And he's there for hours, right? For like us. And what is he doing here? He's right after he talked about that your pleasure is my purpose. That's my real goal. He comes down and he immediately remembers God's favors. Like he doesn't forget God's favor when he's at his lowest. What do we do when we're operating from our low zone? Do you remember God's favor at that moment? Do you remember or do you forget? The Prophet says the next thing he says, your favor is of a more expansive relief to me. Your favor is a more expansive relief. Forget about what happened. Your favor will expand me. Your favor will give me that expansion. When I feel constricted, when I feel this constriction, what's going to open me up is your favors and your blessings and your mercy, and your presence. Just imagine this. Like he understands that even in this constriction, the thing that will expand me is the blessings of Allah. Having not losing sight of being, that gratitude and that Allah's favors and blessings. So really important that how do we come out of our negativity and overwhelmed? When we feel like we want to complain and we just want to stay in that complaining zone, how do we come out and look for the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Important question for us to reflect on. R is rising through patience and humility, and we see that the Prophet sallam, he rises, he shines through this heart model, the R and T that we're going to talk about, rising through patience and humility, and T is thriving with compassion. The Prophet sallam, he's gone from a place of constriction and despair to now you see that as he's in this state of connection with God, he's starting to heal even with his words. And he's mentioning that as long as you're not displeased with me, I do not care what I face, right? This is a statement that he's ready to be patient and he's ready to withstand everything that just happened with the pleasure of Allah. He's ready to be patient. And here's something really important for us to think about. All of us need to think about what are the key triggers that make us lose patience. The Prophet had to have patience, but that patience came, as we see, with the mindfulness of God, with gratitude. That patience came with that deep purpose, deep sense of purpose, because he's so focused to get where he wants to go. He really wants to get to his goal. All those items, they help us have patience. But what triggers make us lose patience? When do we burn out? What makes us burn out? When we burn out, how do we regulate ourselves? If we have nothing left after we get burnt out, how do we get more patience? Where does it come from? These are really important questions to think about. Where does emotion mean? What do triggers mean? How do they show up in my body, in my soul, in my heart, in my mind? How do we regulate them? And this is really important. And this is one of the pillars of the masterclass, where we talk about how to regulate the science of emotions, and also how to regulate that emotion, both from a neuroscience perspective, but also from a prophetic model. And this heart model, the T, thriving with compassion, we see that the Prophet ﷺ, he is, one of the things about the Prophet is that he knows where the mercy comes from. He knows who replenishes his reservoir, his cup, when the cup is empty. What do we do when our cups are empty? We feel like we have nothing more to give, right? Like we just burnt out. We're just done. We have nothing else to give. At that moment, who can fill that up? The one who's the most compassionate, the most merciful. Oh, most compassionate and mercifully reaches out to Allah. You are the Lord of the weak. You are my Lord. You are my Lord. And this filling your cup through the mercy of Allah is so important. Whenever the Prophet ﷺ, and we mentioned this in the article, that whenever he was overwhelmed, he would immediately connect it to the mercy of Allah. He would say, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, bi rahmatika nastaghiz, bi rahmatika astaghiz. He would say, oh, the most ever-living, ever-sustaining Hayyu al-Qayyum, bi rahmatika, in your mercy, astaghiz, I ask refuge, I ask shelter. In your mercy, cover me with your mercy, fill me with your mercy. That the Prophet would be heard making dua about, fill me with your nur, your light. Give me your nur in my eyes, in my ears, in front of me and behind me, and right of me, left of me. So when you're overwhelmed, are we seeking that mercy? Are we refilling ourselves with that compassion and mercy? And what happens when this dua finishes? This dua that signifies that healing with mindfulness of God, the engaging with purpose, rising with patience, achieving gratitude, rising with patience, and thriving with compassion, as we have seen the dua, angels appearing with this angel that has never appeared before. And Jibreel says, O Prophet of Allah, this angel has never come down before. And he's in charge of the mountains, and he would crush the two mountains, and he would crush the people of Taif. He would just give your order. And the Prophet thrives at this moment. This just, in a matter of minutes, the Prophet goes from his lowest to his highest. If you think about this, like this action of the Prophet, what he does now, like he's at his highest level. He's operating from his highest level. He has healed through mindfulness, through purpose, through gratitude, through patience, through compassion. He has come up to a place that he's now responding in such a way that it will transform millions of people. Millions of people will be transformed. Because he said, if they do not accept, I pray that their descendants will worship Allah one day. Their descendants will not associate partners with Allah. They will not make sure. They'll accept Allah. And what happens? That this dua of the Prophet and this gesture of compassion and this operating, going away from his lower to, rising to his higher self, because of that, I am sitting here today. I am sitting in front of you today, and I am teaching you. I'm attempting to teach you about how to process overwhelm the prophetic heart. Like, what a beautiful thing that from Taif, people of Taif, the Banu Thaqif became Muslim, and from their progeny, their descendants come Muhammad ibn Qasim, who conquers Sindh. He makes a pathway for Muslims to come in, and the Muslim scholars, and Sufis and people from around the Muslim world, migrates to South Asia, And today, those of us that are descendants of South Asians, that entire region of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the entire region, we owe our Islam, we owe our standing today and being here together on that day of the Prophet ﷺ, on that dua of the Prophet, on that day that the Prophet ﷺ, made dua for the descendants of people of Taif, or he let them go, and he had that compassion. We owe our Islam and our deen to that. So this is what happens, when you feel like you're constricted, you feel like you are at such a low point in your life, or maybe in your day or your week. At that moment when you're able to heal, and at that moment when you're able to channel that to God, and at that moment, if you're able to rise from your low to your high, to your higher self, such blessing will be opened, such doors of barakah will open for you that you have never imagined. Never imagined. وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَمَنْ يَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. That when you are at your low, and at that moment when you come back to God and you channel all of that to God, and you try to still operate from your higher self, despite being burnt out, that is when the doors of Allah opens. That is where the barakah opens. That is where du'as are accepted. That's when you make all the du'as. That's when you get everything you want, and you will see them start coming true, one after the other after the other. Because after every difficulty comes ease. After every constriction comes expansion. And this is something that, as we talk about Khadija's story, she's burnt out. She's a career mom. She's juggling between her career and her kids at home. And, she's often burnt out, not able to focus, just on autopilot, doing one thing after the other. And as we are applying this, not able to focus, she's not able to focus versus just being mindful, just coming back to the mindfulness, presence, awareness, just being mindful of, can I just do 2 or 3 things that takes me closer to God, that takes me closer to my better self, just focusing on a few things. Not, if I don't making a whole list, like for me, I make a whole list of my to-dos on the left, on my journal the night before, and then 2 or 3 focus areas max on the right. And I focus on those one. Even if I do one, alhamdulillah. If I can do 2 or 3, great. But the to-do, we'll get through this slowly but surely, inshallah. They're not things that I have to really worry about. They're things that will happen in between. So clearing your mind, setting the intention the night before, making dua to Allah, asking him to guide you and give you that presence is really important. And as we talk about Khadija's story, or even the Omar story in the story, in the article, they're continuously juggling between different roles, right? And asking ourselves that between all of these roles, how can I be more intentional? What is my purpose? Why am I doing what I'm doing? Is this aligned to my purpose in life? Purpose of getting closer to God? Purpose of getting to my better or best self? And filtering things out through that filter. And then taking a little bit of time to be intentional in everything you do and try to do that well. Try to be there in that moment. And this is where also this concept, like when you're juggling between so many things, you're like, oh my God, I have to take care of so many things. This is where you have to check your ego. You have to really check your ego and tell yourself, hey, it's not me, right? It's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts me. It's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts me. And we mentioned this about Imam Ibn Ata'illah al-Iskandari rahimahullah. Al-Fa'il, he said that al-Ghafil إِذَا أَصْبَحَ يَنْظُرُ مَاذَا يَفْعَلُ. The person who is negligent, he's the one, he wakes up in the morning, he thinks, oh my God, I've got to do all these things. I have to get all these things done. In today's productivity world, you're supposed to, make plans, and you're supposed to really know what you're doing, and you're checking yourself in the morning, and you're like, you think that you're on top of things. But according to, from this spiritual master, Ibn Ata'illah rahimahullah, he says that person who gets up in the morning and thinks, what am I going to do? All the things that I'm going to do today, all the things that I'm going to accomplish today, he's a ghafil. He's negligent. And a ghafil is a complete opposite to mindful, present, aware, right? So ghafil, forgetful. A forgetful gets up in the morning. How is it a forgetful person? Like, he's not forgetful. He's remembering everything he has to do that day, right? Or she's remembering everything she has to do that day. How is that person forgetful? But this is the spiritual wisdom that we have in our being. Ibn Ata'illah rahimahullah is saying that Al-aqil, the intelligent person is he who ينظر ماذا يفعل الله به. Where does he sees, where does Allah want me to be? Allah, where do you want me to be today? And wherever you're placing me today, I'll be there to serve. You are doing it, and I'm just there to serve you. I'm not doing it. If I'm removed from it, my family will move on. My work will go on. My organization will continue. The world will keep spinning. The suns and the moons and the planets are going to keep coming out. Nothing's going to stop when I'm gone. So all I'm doing is just showing up where you want me to be. And I'm trying to be of service. It is not in my hands. I'm not doing it. You are placing me there, and I am just being of service. What a beautiful way to step back from yourself, not let yourself be an obstacle for yourself, and just bring God into it, and bring God's assistance into it, and just being there to serve wherever you are. Serve him, worship him through whatever you're doing that day. What a beautiful concept. And achieving with gratitude. You're not feeling like you're enough. Oh, I'm not doing enough. I'm not a good parent. I'm not good enough for this or that. To an abundant mentality. You just shift that to say, I'll be there to serve as much as I can, and I'll ask Allah to fill my gap. Thank you, Allah, for letting me be with my child, to be able to do as much as I've done today. Alhamdulillah. For my shortcomings, astaghfirullah. And then continue to increase me, Allah, and then move on to the next thing. And Allah doesn't want perfection. He just wants you to be mindful. He just wants you to do your best, whatever you can. And some days you're not going to be able to do your best in everything you do. Some days you get things done, and that's okay. Just do it for him. And then transition mindfully to the next thing. And then rising through patience, and you're getting carried away. You're reacting to your family's less than ideal manner. And this is where mindfulness of God is so important in our deen, that taking time to have, cultivate silence, taking time to really take a few deep breaths to let go, and just really focusing on the remembrance of God or mindfulness of God, to take time to respond more effectively, so important. And then, inshallah, last but not least, before I take Q&A, because we're reaching the end of the session, that burnout that you're feeling, Khadija is feeling, Omar is feeling, as we mentioned in the article, and that's the story of many people that have told me that we're going through this overwhelm. And that I wrote the article because multiple people are telling me, as I was surveying people, that we're going through this overwhelm. And we're like, okay, in month of Rabiul Awwal, we're entering the beautiful month of Rabiul Awwal, when our beloved Prophet was sent to this world. What legacy of the Prophet do you want to revive? And we said, let's revive that sense of deep presence and mindfulness of God, and how he operated himself and took himself from a lower self to the higher self. So allocating some time to nurture that spiritual, emotional, physical oneness in yourself is really important. That compassion, nurture that, fill your cup to the mercy of God, and then nurture that before you show up with the world, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm going to lead a short practice, and I'll open it up for Q&A, inshallah. For this practice, I'll make it brief, but stay with me, and I'll do a quick poll after that to see how you're feeling after that, okay? So I'm going to turn my video off, listen to my audio, and listen to the instruction. It'll be short, but I want you to really let go of everything you're doing right now. The chat window, whatever you have to get to next. Life is going to keep happening. Don't worry about it. Just be here for now. Okay, be here for this moment. Bismillah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Let's sit up straight for this practice. Place your lower back on the chair that you're sitting on. Just support your lower back. Sit up straight. Lengthen your upper spine to bring this sense of alertness in your body. You're well supported in your lower back, yet you have lengthened your upper back. Place your hand on your thighs. Feel the sense of grounding where you are in the space you're in. Feel the floor with your feet. Yet soften your shoulder. Just soften your shoulder. Just let the gravity pull your shoulder. Just bring this sense of relaxation. Being alert, yet relaxed. Lowering our gaze. And as Imam Muhasibi and many of our other scholars teach us, how to try to learn to focus. Try to have this concept of fikr, tafakkur, muraqabah. How do we practice it? Closing our eyes, either softening your gaze or closing your eyes and looking inward in the heart. Just lowering our gaze, perhaps closing our eyes or closing our gaze if that brings us more attention to our heart. Let's take a deep breath together and a long breath out. Taking a deep breath and a long breath out. Bismillah. Taking another deep breath and a long breath out. See if you can bring a sense of relaxation or just a sense of ease in your body. Just bring a sense of ease in your mind. Next, as we take a deep breath, see if you're able to gather your attention, your mind on that breath. Just for a moment, we will think about a stress or something that overwhelmed you recently. Maybe something in a scale of 1 to 10, maybe something around 4 or 5, not something traumatic, something that you were able to work with. Think of a stressor, something that stressed you out, something that made you feel overwhelmed. Just think of something for a moment. Let's now try to see how that feels. If you are able to visualize how it felt at that moment, how did you feel as you were feeling stressed? Again, don't bring something that is maybe an 8 or a 9 or a 10, something traumatic or something very difficult, something that is a little bit easier to work with, but let's just bring that visualization, something that you worked with recently that made you a little stressed. What was it? All right, as you now visualize or think about the stressor at this moment, let's just remember to return to the presence and the mindfulness of Allah. So we're going to remember Allah by returning to His presence. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. Just for a few moments, can you say Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk and pointing your attention to your heart and returning as if you're bringing your heart back in the presence of God. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. As you say atubu ilayk, visualize the mercy and forgiveness of Allah being ready to greet you. How does it feel if Allah sends you mercy and forgiveness as you say Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk? Can you say it with your heart without having to move your tongue? Just for a few moments, let's sit and say Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk from our heart, visualizing that mercy and forgiveness from Allah. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh narrates that whoever will make istighfar, whoever will return to God, they will return to the mindfulness of God. Allah will make a way out for them from every difficulty. Every time we're having a difficulty, feeling overwhelmed, or feeling stressed, just for a moment, take a few deep breaths and returning to Allah. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk. For this next practice, as you think about your mind, the state of your mind, as you're thinking about that stressor, what type of thoughts or emotions are present in your mind? Just checking in with our mind. Is it just a dull sensation? You're feeling numb, you're not able to really access the thought or emotion? Or perhaps it's this one thought or one emotion that is a little bit overwhelming. Or perhaps it's a lot of thoughts that are passing through. A lot of different emotions or thoughts are passing through. At this moment, just visualize yourself. Think of these thoughts that are passing through, or if there are any emotions passing through, think of them as clouds. And think of your heart as vast as the sky. When you feel this constriction, when you feel overwhelmed, you feel stressed, asking Allah, Rabbi shrah li sadri. Allah, please expand my chest. Rabbi shrah li sadri. Wa yassir li amri. Allah, please make my task easy for me. Rabbi shrah li sadri. Allah, expand my chest. Can you visualize your heart, your chest, as vast as the sky? Allah granted you this beautiful expansion. And the thoughts are just like clouds passing through. And you're not getting carried away by those clouds. You're just observing them pass through. Just with a smile in your face, with this presence of God in your heart. Just for a moment, visualize this. If you still feel some difficulty that remains, now let's end this practice by returning to that dua of the Prophet, asking Allah, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, bi rahmatika nastaghiz. Visualizing Allah's mercy descending upon you and surrounding you. Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, bi rahmatika nastaghiz. Allah, we ask shelter, refuge in this mercy of yours that surrounds us from all sides. وَلَا تَكِلْنَا إِلَىٰ أَنفُسَنَا طَرْفَةَ عَيْنٍ. Do not leave us to our ego, to our lower self, even for a blink of an eye. Be with us. Bring us back to our better self, our best self, Allah. From your heart, just repeat just for a few moments, Allah, we seek refuge in your mercy. Just repeat just for a few moments without moving your tongue, just from your heart for a few moments, and we'll end the practice. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Inshallah, welcoming everyone back. You can move around a little bit, stretch if you need to, if you're just sitting for a little bit. Just ending this session before I open it up for Q&A, with this quick poll. If you go back to menti.com and just say 7650 8621, the same code as before, punch it in. How do you feel now after this practice? How do you feel now? You share with us how you're feeling. The one word, check in mind, body, and heart. Check in one more time with your mind, body, and heart, and share the one word that's showing up right now after this practice. If you just scroll up just a little bit on the chat, it's right there, menti.com, and the code. MashaAllah. I am so happy. May Allah keep you smiling, Sister Bintu. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's beautiful. I cannot stop smiling, inshallah. May Allah keep us smiling. Adhakallahu sinnak, inshallah. May Allah continue to keep us smiling and grateful. May Allah continue to make our heart smile and let let the smile come through our physical smile, inshallah, on our face. May Allah make us smile in this world, and may Allah make us smile when we see Him on the Day of Judgment, and when we see our Prophet ﷺ on the Day of Judgment, inshallah. When we see each other in Jannah, may Allah keep us smiling. Jazakallah khair. Thank you, everybody. This is beautiful. About 40 people sharing. MashaAllah. We see a shift here. We see a shift that the difficulties that you're feeling as you arrived, there has been a shift as we have just done it was, I think less than 10 minutes of practice, but it helped us. It grounded us. And it gives us that strength. Now, can you relate to the Prophet ﷺ's dua? That when he really felt that connection with God, it started healing him. And then adding that purpose, gratitude, patience, compassion with it, it gave the Prophet who he was. It gave that, that beautiful thing that the Prophet left with us, inshallah, these qualities. The legacy of the Prophet is not his wealth. It is this knowledge of connecting and experiencing God and operating from our best self, inshallah. Thank you so much. I'm so happy and thankful that you felt the shift. May Allah give us tools. May Allah teach us tools that we can use in our life every day. This world, it can be turbulent. It can be distracting. It can be overwhelming for all of us. Even I can tell you today, there are so many things going on in my day. And even just to arrive, I had to take a little time to arrive in this session. But as I have doing this practice, I also feel this sense of peace, sense of just being here with you. And Allah has given us beautiful tools. May Allah teach us those tools. And our intention through the Mindfulness Masterclass is to revive those prophetic tools, revive those tools that, alhamdulillah, I think that the art and science of presence and mindfulness that we have lost as an ummah. So inshallah, I will end here by inviting all of you, inshallah, to the mindfulness masterclass, inshallah. I would love for all of you to join, inshallah. Here is the heart model. If you haven't seen it, I think we shared it in the article as well. This is the heart model that we are basing our mindfulness masterclass. There are 6 sessions. The first 2 sessions are on mindfulness, and then the next 4 sessions are on purpose, gratitude, patience, and compassion. And we don't teach these from a lecture or a heavy content perspective. We teach this with some content, but we actually practice tools. Just like we did a mindfulness practice, we have specific practices on mindfulness on how to develop and really go back to our purpose, how to develop gratitude and practice gratitude, how to practice patience, how to practice compassion. So they're all mindfulness-based practices, but they're also tools, both science-based and the prophetic tools that we practice together during the masterclass. So I would love for all of you to join us. This is something we're doing this Rabiul Awal, trying to revive the prophetic heart. What is a better way to spend our Rabiul Awal than engaging with the Prophet in this beautiful way? I mean, alhamdulillah, we have listened to lectures and khutbahs and various things that take us back to that love and that connection with the Prophet. But this class is where we're trying to go deeper into the heart of the Prophet and the experience the Prophet felt through these, and then how can you try to emulate and try to relive that experience. May Allah grant us all the tawfiq, and welcome. Jazakallah khair. And with that, I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Shamaila, inshallah, let me know. I think I went over my time a little bit. I apologize. Thank you for being here, everybody. It's an honor.
No problem at all. We have Jazakallah khairan Wadud for that beautiful talk and practice as well. I feel calmer myself, which I tend to do after the practices that you guide us through. So alhamdulillah for that. There are a couple questions here, so I'll take a couple kind of the logistics ones, if that's okay. Yes, the final recording will be shared with those that registered. Also, it'll be available on our social media channels as well, our platforms, so keep a lookout. Please give us up to 48 hours for that. Just bear with us on that. And then also, there was one other thing that I wanted to say that I am actually forgetting. So please go ahead with it and answer some of the other questions there. So number one, Zainal is asking, while multitasking may help you achieve the goals, the list of things to do, and reduce the sense of overwhelm, it does take away from some of the focus, mindfulness of your actions. For example, I'll do my daily AM dhikr as I do my chores. What strategies would you advise as to how to achieve that balance?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. As you know, some of you might know and might have also seen the research that our brains are not really programmed for multitasking. What it does is that it basically quickly switches back and forth. So as you are multitasking, your brain is actually unitasking, but just going from one thing to the other and then jumping back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And what you're doing is you're aging your brain by continuously multitasking. So one of the things that we need to learn is that from the prophetic practice, when the Prophet says that he listened to someone, he did not only turn his face, but he turned what did he turn? His chest. And as he turned his chest, as if he was listening with all his heart. And he did not listen or look at anywhere else while he was really listening to this one person. When he was finished with that person, then he would turn his face and then his body, his chest to the other person. So as we see from the Prophet ﷺ that he was wherever he was, right? Be where you are. So if you're at home, be at home. If you're at work, be at work. If you're in a meeting, be in that meeting. If you're in prayer, then be at that prayer. And the key to that is transition between things. First and foremost, scheduling your day out to do, focused work, and also in between take some time out to just get up and go for a walk, or sit and do a mindfulness practice or a dhikr or tilawat of the Quran for a few moments, or just sit and take a few deep breaths. Something that I asked, how many deep breaths did you take today, right? It's really important to use tools to transition between things and find your focus for the day and not overschedule yourself. This is going to be really important. And if that means that some things on the to-do list are not going to be done, that's okay. Just find your key focus areas. It's going to be difficult. And if it's really difficult for you to do it, every day, then start with 1 day, start with 2 days, start with the weekend, and then slowly increase it. Detox, maybe just get off all the phones and computers for Saturday or just for the weekend. And then on the weekdays, think about, how do I schedule myself in that way? So I hope some of these tools are useful, but also learning tools, learning practices can help, inshallah. How do you interrupt your thoughts and press the pause button to reflect? I'm looking at Anika's question here. And you do not fight with your thoughts. This is really important. You do not try to interrupt your thoughts. You do not try to press that pause. I mean, you press the pause button by your practice, but you don't necessarily try to pause that thought. Meaning that the more you're going to try to fight a thought, the more the thought is going to bother you. So the practice from a neuroscience perspective is that when thoughts come, you just label the thought. You don't pause the thought. You just label the thought and say, oh, it's just another anxious thought. All right, I'm gonna let it pass through, and I'm just gonna be here in this moment, right? And just like that practice we did, we have a few more tools we will discuss in the class, but one of the practices, as we just did, that think of your heart as expansive as the sky and let the thought be passing through like a cloud without you getting carried away. So labeling thoughts and just saying, oh, I'm just having another anxious thought. Okay, no problem, I'll just come back to what I was doing. Label those thoughts, let them pass through, give them some time, and then they'll pass through, inshallah. With time, you'll learn to clear it up, inshallah. Can I know? All right. Let's see if there's any other content-based question. Yeah. Really important question from, it is more difficult to unwind and feel overwhelmed because you feel like you're always at work because you're working from home. This is true, and nobody can help you unless you create that sense of structure for yourself. So that's why it's so important that you take charge. Try to find someone that you can maybe talk it out with, maybe a colleague you trust or a friend or a spouse, but talk to someone and say, hey, how do I make sure that I set a line after which I transition? So finding your transition, and maybe even finding areas, if you have space where you do work and then you come away from that to be home with your kids, and then maybe if you have extra space to even transition between spaces, that's great. If you don't, at least that time and that mechanism for you to transition and say, this is when I turn it off. So that's important. Can you do it all the time? Maybe you can't. Maybe you need a 3 or 4 hours break for the family and then go back to finish some work at night. Sometimes people do that. But be mindful of those times that you transition and really try to focus on where you are. That's all I can say for now. I think that it's a deeper subject to go into, but I hope that helps, inshallah. Was there any other question that I didn't get?
There are a couple more that have come through. And I encourage everyone to add your questions into the Q&A section and not in the chat, because we will miss them most likely if they're coming into the chat, because that's where the comments are coming through. Further ado, if you could take a look at the Q&A space again, there are a few new ones that have come through.
Yeah, so there is, let me check real fast. Oh, how can you differentiate whether it's from the shaitan or your own ego? This is a really good question. I'm not sure if I have the bandwidth to really go into it right now, but one of the modules we go into this, we go into, where do thoughts come from? Do thoughts come from God? Do they come from angels? Do they come from the shaitan, or do they come from our ego? How do you differentiate between them? And there are a couple of different models from our scholars. Imam Suyuti gave us a model, and Sheikh Amin Air, one of my teacher's teacher, gave us another model, which is also based on one of Imam Ghazali's teachings. So we explore where do thoughts come from a spiritual perspective, and how do you try to identify and be more conscious? It requires being more aware, more present, and really tuning in to understand where it's coming from and being reflective. But there is a model, and we will teach it in the masterclass, but it's important to know. It's important to kind of go into that. But because it's a whole model to explain, I maybe don't have full bandwidth for that, inshallah. But I appreciate that question. It's a really, really important question. Any advice for overthinking? And I would say that if your mind is always racing, then finding time to sit and start practicing mindfulness. Do you have a 10 minutes practice? Do you sit for 10 minutes and just breathe and just make dhikr and just be there in that moment and just let go of everything else? Do you have that practice? When you're sitting down and making wudu, do you let go and really sit down and just slowly do wudu and just try to be in that? The more you practice your mindfulness muscle, the more you're going to come out of your overthinking muscle. Your overthinking and ruminating muscle, which is associated with the part of the brain called default mode network, DMN. Your DMN is least active when you're meditating, being mindful, you're making dhikr, you're praying. And it's most active when you are not being present in your task and you're always going from one thing to the other all the time. So unless you start a practice to train your brain and slowly shift your brain, your DMN, to be more calm and more focused in the present moment, you're not going to be able to overcome it that easy. So what that means is that neuroplasticity, which we talk about in the course, is that you can train your brain, but start with a practice. Do you have 10-minute adhkar practice in the morning where you really focus in that moment and really do adhkar, where you're just thinking about the meaning and you're really being there, you're taking a few deep breaths, you're not thinking about anything else, and you're really there? Do you have a practice in the evening, for example, or before you go to bed? When you wake up in the morning, like Richard also was teaching in the wellness class, do you take a few deep breaths to reflect on just being in the moment, being that, focusing on that day, bringing all the beautiful energy and gratitude practice for that day? It's important to have these practices to calm and center your mind. So even if you're not able to handle it right away or address it right away, can you address it through a 5 or 10-minute practice once or twice or 3 times a day, or even once a day? That's a start. Start from there, and then slowly you can train your brain, inshallah. The flow theory, it's really, really good question. The flow happens when your skills, your ability, and the challenge that you have a challenge, and then your skills and ability matches up, and it just flows. You're in the flow zone in that moment. When your skill is not that high, and the challenge is very high, then you start panicking or you start getting anxious. When the challenge is too low and your ability is too high, then you start getting bored. So flow happens when they match up. So the flow theory is that how do you get into that state of flow? And this is something really important that the mindfulness researchers say, that mindfulness gets you flow ready. When your skills and abilities match up and you really be in the zone, you want to be in the zone. What do athletes do? One of the sports psychologists, he used to say that mindfulness gets you flow ready. You just be in that moment, you be present, let go, and that gets you in the zone. It's really important too. That's why it's really important to practice and learn how to practice mindfulness, because it helps you with flow. Do you cover breathing during masterclass? Well, it's really important to learn to breathe in a way that we're able to take a few deep breaths, and we learn how to take the breath, through our nose, then our upper body, and then all the way up to, for the kids, we call it the belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. It's really important to learn how to hold it for about 4 to 5 seconds and then let it out for about 4 to 5 seconds. And then those deep breaths through your nose can really heal and really bring the oxygen in and really help you, really activate the parasympathetic system, really calms you down. So those are things that we keep practicing throughout the mindfulness practices, right? So it's not necessarily a breathing training separate from our mindfulness practice. It's an Islamic spiritual practice. We start with the breath to just learn how to calm ourselves and try to be in the moment. And then we shift to dhikr and the awareness of God, or different type of practices based on various models, prophetic models, Imam Ghazali's models, Ibn Ata'illah's models, and so on. Last questions. Let's see.
Let's take one more, and we will save the rest, inshallah, for the info session that we're going to be hosting next Monday at the same time. And more
I think. Thank you, Shamila. I think I'll stop here if you don't mind. Yeah.
No problem at all. Yes. So we look forward to seeing you at the info session next Monday, or if you're feeling ready to sign up for the class, we would love to have you there as well. I've dropped the link in the chat. So also barakacademy.com/mindfulness is also how you can find it. There was one question about Baraka Academy. All masterclasses, there is a cost to them. We do offer scholarships. There's a scholarship form. So I had also included my email address in the chat as well. We can also add that to the email that we send out with the recording. So if you registered, feel free to reach out to us if you require a scholarship. We also have a community that is also at a cost, but again, there's multiple ways, right? There's a scholarship, but there's also, we're a professional training company, and oftentimes HR, especially if you're working for an organization, a professional organization, they sometimes do reimburse courses such as this. So keep that in mind as you're kind of looking to see whether you can sign up for this at this point in time, if you are feeling inclined, and also more than happy to have a further conversation with you if you would like. So Jazakallah khairan for joining. And Brother Wadud, would you like to close us out with the dua? Your duas, mashallah, are really touching. So love for you to close us out.
اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث أصلح لنا شأننا كله ولا تكلنا إلى أنفسنا طرفة عين. O the ever-living, ever-sustaining, we ask refuge and shelter in your mercy, Ya Allah. Please grant us your shelter. Ya Allah, fill us with your mercy. Surround us with your mercy. Allahumma nas'aluka bi rahmatika allati wasi'at kulla shay an taghfir li. We ask you to forgive us, cleanse us, purify us, Ya Allah, through your mercy. Ya Allah, we ask you through that mercy that surrounds us, surrounds all things, encompasses all things. Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Salam, Ya Salam, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, grant us the beautiful, beautiful tools that we practice today through the beautiful story of our beloved Prophet ﷺ. Give us tawfiq to live that example of the Prophet ﷺ. Ya Allah, grant us the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. Grant us the beautiful qualities we discuss of the Prophet ﷺ. Give us the tawfiq to live the legacy, experience the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ. Ya Allah, this Rabiul Awwal, give us tawfiq to revive this heart of the Prophet ﷺ. Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, all the difficulties you've seen, all the stresses we have seen as people checked in, grant them, Ya Allah, afiyah. Ya Allah, grant them ease. Ya Allah, grant us and free our mind to be focused, to be present, to have peace. Grant us tawfiq and tools to access our presence, access awareness, access inner calm, access our best self, Ya Allah. Do not leave us alone to our ego and our lower self. Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum, Ya Hayyu Qayyum, wa la takilna ila anfusana tarfat ayn. Allahumma a'udhu billahi bi wajhi al-kareem sultan al-qadeem min ash-shaytan al-rajim. Save us from the whispers of shayateen. Save us from the whispers of our ego. Give us tawfiq to be influenced and be inspired by the angelic inspiration, by the inspiration that is through our Prophet, through the Quran, and through your presence, Ya Allah, and through your ilham, Ya Hayyu Ya Qayyum. Guide us and give us tawfiq to overcome this difficult time that we're living in. We are this overwhelming time we're living in. Give us tools, Ya Allah, to clear our mind, clear our heart. Ya Allah, give us tawfiq to cultivate and continue to increase spiritually, emotionally, physically, in every way, Ya Allah. Do not decrease us in any of these ways. Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana. Once you have shown us the path, shown us the tools, ba'da idh hadaytana, after you have guided us, Ya Allah, ba'da idh hadaytana, Ya Allah, wa hab lana min ladunka rahma. Ya Allah, do not deviate our hearts after you have guided it. Min ladunka rahma, through your mercy, Ya Allah. Min ladunka rahma, innaka antal wahhab. You are Wahhab. You love to keep giving gifts and keep giving gifts. Keep giving gifts, Ya Allah. Give us all of the gifts we've asked, and give us even more than we've asked out of your majesty and greatness. Ameen. Ameen. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair, everybody. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.